Issues with the Law, a program that deals with issues bordering around the law, attempting to unravel specific ones intended to provide a clear insight into some of the accompanying challenges. My name is Abdul Rahman Kamara, presenter of the program. In today's edition of the program, I have as a studio guest lawyer Sonkita Conte, Director Namati. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Abdul Rahman.
Today we're going to look at where 12 organizations, including yours, Namati, have a dialogue forum with political parties, representatives, to commit on improving land and environment within the context of land management in the country. For which the theme of the program is We Land, Now We Future, where they have this pledge. And there has been a commitment at the end of the entire exercise this morning. But before we go deep into this discussion, I will want to avail this opportunity to our viewers to pretty much understand the issues that we have discussed this morning and some of the challenges so far expressed by landowners, so that they will be in a better position to understand the things we're going to discuss here in the studio. I'll go over to my technician to give us a highlight as to the conference that was held this morning at the Mniata Conference Hall, Brookfields in Freetown.
Now, where they were taken, they only had access to 186 acres of land, 3 villages of over 1,500 people. So if you do the maths, you would know that the 186 acres of land, in order for them to give village and you know to sow.
Yeah.
But they don't go push the inside now. Now they didn't do. Now the village therefore grow over time and therefore grow, they go for born picking them, and at the land and say for feed them. So how then when they for survive? The company when they push them this new place for, then they mine. Then they mine ore, then they ship the ore outside, and then they make money out of it. These people don't like the situation that they are in right now. They don't want it because they don't have access to enough land for agriculture.
We Elizabeth N. Kolka, Elizabeth Ngadi Kolka. Me heart in a bleed for me people that come on about the streets. Who side the mess they walk when I up about Hamokele, now we now. We who side and plants day. The young plants when they use now we own bush. Of course we don't get no bush again. They don't destroy all things now we are. The Sirocco came 1992. It removed it from a village. They don't give it removing allowance. They don't do all the secret society bush. They pull up. They don't pay nothing. So also when they go build, then they pay 400,000. If I want to carry the money, they say that money they all don't carry it. That's when then I will get cheap. Then we cheat on the primary chief we don't carry. He said that money all don't carry it. He not do. So what you for do? That's why they will be small. We don't get too much. Big one. They might shoot you and they go school. But we not be get say we uncle when they not go school. I say we not hold that money.
We don't know the amount of lands where they give up. They can't say this now are lease rent. Number 3, the land agreements. A good number of wallow there, so they will attest to that. We don't get no agreement with the investors there. So that they make, they just give whatever little amount they want for give to the landowners there. And this money where they give, now directly to the paramount chief. And the paramount chief now will call in community people and say, you get so amount. I get an example to that.
And we get an agriculture company, we are the Sierra Leone Agriculture Company. We know care who own the company, all waiting we need, now waiting to the people. And the first issue we face, they're not being properly educated on the agreement. So some of the things that we, the community people, been sign, they sign in representation. The paramount chief them and other stakeholders they sign, and the community people not even know when they sign for them, and they don't even set eyes on the agreement. and the company not even agree for release the agreement to the people for me to see them through. That's one issue. So that means waiting they say now we sign not to actually the land owning people and the community people and sign, but they sign for them on behalf of the community people.
So 10. They start for operate now. When they do the operation, and they say this year we get problem because we don't we're not able for to all the amount of fees we will do. So we will pay now 160 bushels. So all the arrears be paid. Since when they be doing agreement with the community, they don't get any development the way they will develop the community where they be in that area. And in fact, the land where they be occupying are the vast land. Now they the people they hope, now they able to do everything for themselves. They don't get any land so far where they do any investment so far. So within the year where the people they occupy the land, the paramount chief where he did the present day, so whatever payment where they do now a hand where they pass it. So paramount chief, the community they go they complain. They say, well, this community don't come, but they be Terry say this land where they don't come occupy the road, they get for maintenance this road for we, they get for help with beginning with scholarship, they get for even help we with the community barrier, but all things where they be put inside the agreement, where they read the agreement, everything will be there. Now just baba something.
We don't know. We don't really know. We only bless Namati that they make we even get the plan of the land. But even to now, we the landowners, we don't really understand the plan, how many acres of land where they occupy. All waiting where they say that the Kiwi, when the corporate social responsibility, no they will ever adhere to. As we talk on so today, this year when they can they give social amount the other year and they drop down. We don't even know what it belongs to. We don't really understand.
Occupied by private people. How did they do this offering of their land here? When I get for look and visit them and they all. Because people and they get land at very, very dangerous points and way and they build houses them as we see. Quite recently we run into trouble when I landslide. We see the kind of destruction will happen. Now if you go through the peninsula, one of the things and the challenges they already see, you know, we get sand mining when they go on at the peninsula. If you look, if you take some certain pictures, you get a picture too. If you get the sea view picture, take the landscape, then you see how a danger. Then stand there all long go. Waiting left, the stone and the water they coming. If you go through the peninsula, you see, waiting get they take place there. We get the stone mining, they go on. We get heart moving, where most of the road the way they construct, then they move heart, the movement of the dirty for make the road. If you look, it take place on the peninsula, it take place now in Waterloo, Pengima. If you go, you will see and they move the heart. All these are environmental issues.
Well, that's exactly what's happened this morning at the Meta Conference Hall on land management. Once more, let me welcome my studio guest, Director Namati Lasun Kita Conte. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
There were many issues that were raised this morning by some farmers in terms of what they do experience when some of these contracts are being entered into for excuse me, for the use of their lands. Like the critical issue that were raised during the meeting, the role of the paramount chiefs in land management, the issue of land degradation, the aspects of central control, intimidation of landowners, the complex process on land acquisition, among many things that were raised this morning. First off, take us through what, in your view, should have informed the decision by Namati, including other organizations, to actually organize this dialogue forum.
Great, thank you so much, and thanks for covering the event this morning. As you know, over the past 10 years, Sierra Leone has embarked on the process of large-scale land investment. our government have felt that as an economic policy, there is need for us to attract foreign direct investment. And this means that we need to play up all of the considerable resources that communities have, that we have as a country. And so what we have seen is that over the past decade, there has been huge advertisements. There's been a huge call by the government for foreign direct investment. And so we've opened the door, essentially, to people to come and exploit our marine resources, our land-based resources, our fertile lands. And I would say that has created a bit of a tension between those who have used the land traditionally for various reasons and the newcomers who are now really gobbling up land on a large scale. So you would find these investments seeking to get land in excess of 10, 15, 20, 30,000 hectares, and for some over 60,000 hectares for mining or large-scale agriculture. And so these competing interests have led to serious tensions with small-scale farmers losing access over their lands. And so once you give a company 40, 50,000 hectares of land, which in many cases would comprise the entire supply of land in a particular village or in several villages, there is nothing left for them to do except they hope to be employed by the company. And in many cases, that is not a dream that comes to reality, because these companies, for agricultural ones, would employ you only seasonally when they would require you to do certain kinds of work. And so with the advent of large-scale land investment, we've seen a number of challenges coming up. And in addition to the ones I've mentioned, you also have the issue of the effect on the environment of these big investments, particularly mining. So you go to areas like Kono or Tonkolili, where you have huge mining projects happening. The impact on the environment has been serious. It's been devastating. So you would find that the large areas have been dug up, that there are tailings, there are dams in different places that have not been kept quite well. And these things filter into whatever land is left for communities, and it affects their ability to farm or to even access water for personal and domestic needs. So the advent of large-scale land investment has really thrown up a number of challenges. And unfortunately, we've not been able to address those challenges very well. We do have the regulators. We have the mines and minerals regulators. We have the environment regulator. But sadly, they have not been able to respond to the challenges of these kinds of investments. And the consequence, therefore, has been that communities that are adversely affected, that are directly in the line of these operations, have borne the brunt of some of these investments. And so, over the past years, NGOs, CBOs have tried to provide some service to these communities, getting them to complain to the investors, to the regulators about the conduct of some of these corporations. But it's been a slow process. It's been really hard. Sometimes you get investors to listen. In many cases, they do not respond to these complaints. Okay. And it's the same thing for the regulators. And this was one compelling reason why we felt it was important for us to somehow bring the communities that are suffering and those who are aspiring for a political position to have a discourse on what should be the best way to resolve this problem.
Okay, thank you so much. I think you've done a very good job to actually understand, to explain the rationale behind the holding of this conference in the first place. But as I said myself, I was there. I took my time off to really understand some of the problems that the people do explain. One thing that really comes to mind was the aspect of no better education on when this agreement are being entered into. The technicality about the legal representation, the technical languages I tend to use is extremely cumbersome to a point that the lay public could hardly grab a clear understanding of all of this. I was beginning to think that when these contractual agreements are being entered into with multinational corporations, who does the representation? Who provide the legal representation on behalf of the people? And what is responsibility of colleague lawyers in ensuring that they educate the people thoroughly, that once you've appended your signature on this contract, these are the expected benefits, these are the do's and don'ts, who is actually responsible in all of this? Because to me, it's like a commonplace perception, all of them. They highlighted that key challenge.
So absolutely. So that was one of the main things that came up in the in the dialogue session today, and it's a problem that we've been grappling with. I don't have a problem with the complexity of the agreements that are being drawn up. What I have a challenge with is communities understanding that and having a voice in the preparation of those documents. So normally what happens is a company comes in, gets legal representation and gets all the professional help that it requires to get land. They approach the local authorities, the district council personnel, the chiefdom authorities, and these corporations have the resources to hire the services of lawyers, of engineers and the rest. Now they go in and they request for land from these communities. Now in our experience we've seen that some of them would say, okay, we want to create a level playing field, so we would pay for the services of a lawyer for the communities. Now invariably what happens is, because the company is paying for the services of these lawyers, what we have seen is that the level of engagement between the lawyer that the companies pay for with the communities that they're supposed to be representing has been really poor. We have seen that they have not taken up issues that they could have taken up with the company in, you know, defending the rights of their clients, who would in this case be the communities. So that has been a challenge, and you know, we think that perhaps that approach is a bit flawed, because the company that is meant to be on the other side of the table now pays for your legal advice, your legal assistance. Now, what is required in these kinds of situations would be some sort of independent legal assistance for the communities. They should be able to choose the legal assistance that they require, that they want, and you could have a framework that would get the companies to pay for these services, but not necessarily directly, in which case there would somehow be some sort of a hook that the companies could actually influence what the lawyers do on behalf of communities. And the other challenge we have is that when you're doing contracting on large-scale land investments, it is different from contracting when you're doing when you're representing a client in Freetown, because you know, up country you're dealing with lots of villages. A land of what 50,000-60,000 hectares would span dozens of villages, and ideally you want each of these villages to understand what is going to be in the agreement. You want them to participate in the drawing up of that agreement. And so that means that all the approaches that you are used to adopting in Freetown as a lawyer would have to be thrown out of the window. You need to go on the ground and engage these people in the language that they understand. Not in English, not reading off the agreement, in the language that they understand. If it's Mendi, if it's Timini, if it's Limba, if it's Loko. You need to sit with them. They need to understand both the benefits and the drawbacks of the project. Because it doesn't make sense for you to simply tell people about the good things that the project would bring and not let them understand what the repercussions would be. Because all of these projects have both good sides and bad sides. And they have lots of bad sides. So there will be implications for the environment. So they need to understand that if you're allowing a company to mine in your community, you're likely going to lose access to your swampland, because the tailings that would come from the operations would get into your swampland, and you will not be able to use it for farming. It would also get into your water source. So it is not as simple as you know, renting a house in Freetown, because people need to understand the nitty-gritty, the upsides and the downsides of these kinds of investments, and so it takes time. And this is why we find that mostly it has been legal NGOs that have been able to really undertake a process of proper consultation and consent seeking in these kinds of processes, because they go into the communities, they sit with them, they take the time to go through drafts of the agreement, they listen to their needs. They tell you, we don't want the company to use land that we're using for our burial sites, or the land that we're using for our secret societies. So you want to make sure that you're capturing all of these things, because at the end of the day, this process has to be between two sides, and both sides should have some equality. But in the main, there has been an inequality in the relationship between companies and communities when it comes to these investment agreements. Again,
tying down the argument on one consideration, the participation of the paramount rulers, the use of the word custodian of the land, to a larger extent has given the paramount rulers a leverage for them to do, well, just the wrong thing over the years. They believe that the paramount rulers are the point of contact between the government and the people. That again is a problem, is a challenge that was repeatedly floated by the speaker. Speaker after speaker touched on this aspect, that the intervention of the paramount chief has not helped over the years in mitigating some of these key challenges.
So, I mean, there is this misconception that's been held for a long time, and I think it's largely been down to the role of the paramount chief in rural societies. Now, the paramount chief is preeminent. The paramount chief has been the go-to person at the chiefdom level. And before the advent of modern democracy, the paramount chief was everything. The paramount chief was parliament, was the judiciary, was the executive. But then over time, the powers have been attenuated.
Eroded.
Exactly. Now, unfortunately, many of them still have that belief that, as far as they're concerned, issues of land should be addressed only by the paramount chief. Now, we know, and this is something we always seek to clarify, that the land in the rural areas does not belong to the paramount chief. The land is not owned by the paramount chief, neither is it owned by the chiefdom council, neither is it owned by the district council. Land in the provinces is owned by families. Land in the provinces is owned by communities. And so, in that circumstance, if a company seeks to acquire land from several villages, it makes sense. And it is but the moral thing to do for those family members to be involved in the process. Over the years, however, we've seen situations where paramount chiefs have gone ahead to sign agreements with investment companies with little or no consultation with the actual landowners, and that has created problems. And so that is something we want to change, and we've been working on a case-by-case basis to change that. But we think this time around that because election is a process by which the people who are directly affected in this particular process, the people choose their leaders. Now, if you bring the people and their leaders, or the potential leaders, into a room and get them to talk, now, after elections, whoever wins power would be able to reflect the challenges and views of these people in their policy development and implementation. But the situation has to change, Raman, because we have lots of companies coming in to do business in Sierra Leone, and we're still faced with these abiding challenges of inadequate consultation and consent seeking, and communities not being able to understand exactly what they're putting their thumbs to. And it's sad, quite frankly, that you would find people who, have signed off their lands for 50 years, and they don't actually understand, all the terms in the agreement. In one particular case, the communities had signed over.
Could it be a deliberate attempt by multinational corporations to actually skew the entire process on their own benefit, that deprive the lay public to actually understand what is embedded in that agreement, in any agreement?
So I would say this: companies want to make profits. They're coming into these situations to do business, so they will do everything possible to maximize profits. Now, it is the responsibility of government to ensure that they act as referees, making sure that regulators are in place, the rules are in place, and people are complying with the rules. Sadly, we have a poor track record of compliance with rules, and we also have challenges with respect to regulators enforcing these rules against companies. And so what we have is a situation where the company is able to use its superior access to wealth because it has money. It also has access to government authorities, and these communities don't have necessarily the same access.
Okay.
And so they are able to basically get their way. They're able to get the communities to sign up to agreements that they don't understand, that are in actual fact detrimental to their rights and interests. And that is the problem that we have to deal with.
Okay, before we come to look at some of the key recommendations on this communique, another compelling challenge is the aspect of compensation and the adherence to the aspect of corporate social responsibility. How did that come out pretty much frequently in some of the revelations that the people tend to make this money?
So there are various aspects of the issue of compensation. So let's take, for example, the issue of rent. So
surface rent.
Yes. So anyone who rents your property has to, who wants your property for a period of time has to pay rent. Now we have a situation where the government has already determined the amount of rent that a company should pay.
Mm-hmm.
For land that does not belong to the government, it belongs to the communities, it belongs to families. So already that is one major means of undercutting the ability of communities and families to get better deals. So the government has said companies should not pay more than $5 per acre for land that they're renting in the provinces. So that is the first bit. Now the second bit to that is that even though the government has set that amount as rent, the communities only get, what, 50% of that amount. So in actual fact, what gets to them as real actual money is what? $2.50. That is what they get. And you can imagine, land is owned by families in the rural areas. Mm-hmm. Families are extended families. And so at the end of the day, if you distribute the amount of money that these companies pay as rent, some people end up getting, what, 30,000 leons or 50,000 leons for a whole year for their land. And the land is then lost to the company for, what, 50 years, and they don't have access to farm or do any other thing there. So I think in this respect, the government is really undercutting communities by, one, setting an artificial price as rent for the land, and then two, making sure that the communities only get 50% of the amount that is paid. Now, the second bit of the issue of compensation is that when it comes to things that the companies meet on the land, so let's imagine that you are leasing your land to a company and the company has to pay the surface rent, but then you have been farming on the land and you have your crops there. The government has set out a policy matrix for companies to pay compensation to these families or these farmers. Now, the challenge we have with that process is that someone has set up a farm of oil palm, which they could get benefits from every single year for over 20 years, because that's the lifespan of a tree. Now, what happens is the company goes in and cuts down the tree and pays compensation only once to the person that owns the tree. And so you get the money and that's it. So something that you could have enjoyed for, what, for 20 years, you only get paid once for it. And so that particular matrix is definitely flawed. We want to see how we could come up with something better. For example, companies paying back like for like. So in one situation that we're advising some communities, we're insisting that the company replants the trees that it is cutting down. So if you cut down a tree, you plant 2 or 3 trees for the community elsewhere. Now, by doing that, you're providing a sustainable means of engaging the company of engaging the community over time. So rather than give them money that they would finish in 1 month, give them the trees that would last for 20, 25 years that they will get periodic benefits from. So these are some of the challenges with respect to the issue of compensation. So it's 2 ways.
I recall where one of the speakers highlighted the challenge of the biggest risk of not dealing with female representation, because in our traditional laws, especially in the southern eastern part of the country, also not to a larger extent, women don't take central command when it comes to taking decisions. And in a situation where there is an eventual death of any family representation or male representation, the continuity in dealing with a woman in that regard could be shelved aside. That in itself is a key challenge.
So definitely, the problems you have are layered problems. So you have problems that beset the community as a whole, and then within the community, there are various groups that suffer particular kinds of problems. Mm-hmm. And the women would be one such group.
Exactly.
And so, as you know, and as many people know, in the north, the cultural and customary systems do not favor women's access to and control over land, women's ownership of land. And we've been in situations where they tell you land business is a man's business, not a woman's business. And we had a situation, as you mentioned, where a paramount chief said that because the last surviving male member of the family had died, so the women were no longer entitled to get the rent from their own family land. Now that is a big challenge, and that has to be addressed. And in some ways, the land policy, which
and it automatically becomes a property of the company that exists, that do business.
No, well, it shouldn't be. It still should be the property of the family. But then what would happen is the paramount chief would still be collecting the rent. They would not cede the rent to the company. They would still be collecting the rent and applying it some other way.
Okay.
And then deliberately withholding that from the family that actually needs it. But then the good thing is the National Land Policy of 2015, which was unveiled last year, really has addressed that. But that is just the beginning. Now it's calling for equality and non-discrimination in land ownership, control, management and use. But then the next step would be to turn that policy into law and be able to enforce that law so that women would no longer be disadvantaged.
Okay. Lason Kisa, I have the communique here that was signed at the end of the exercise, where if I go through the preamble, it says, we the participants at the Conference on Land, the Environment and Elections held at Meta Conference Hall on the 27th day of February 2018, collectively endorse the We Land Now We Own Now We Future pledge. We affirm that our land is our common heritage and the foundation for our development. We commend the participation of the 17 registered political parties at the conference and their public commitment to take action to protect our land, empower the people who depend on land, and to manage our natural resources with prudence and transparency. Now we examine this resolution paragraph after paragraph. We hereby resolve as follows. We will take the message of we land and we future pledge to our villages, towns and districts to further sensitize our people ahead of the March 7 elections. We will ensure that the campaign is sustained beyond the elections, and the commitments by political parties to implement the pledge will become the basis for holding whoever wins the election accountable. Let's deal with the first two. Mm-hmm. Why do you think this aspect is driven towards ensuring that political party representative that were present at the conference could tie themselves up to this commitment as we just 9 days or 8 days barely to the general elections?
So this is the logic. Now the parties form the government. Mm-hmm. The government wields the power. The government makes decisions about who comes in to invest in the country. The government makes the rules. The government implements the rules. And so if you want to catch the government, and we're in an election year, what better way to do that than to target the parties that are contesting for elections? Because mind you, this is when the people are demonstrating their sovereignty, their ultimate authority over those who run the state. And so the communities felt that this would be a good time before the parties form the next government for them to tell us, because this is what they have been doing over the past several weeks, that this is what we are planning as a program if we win power. So the communities want the parties to have in mind the content of the pledge, and it's very simple. The pledge is a one-page document, mm-hmm. which sets out some of the things that the communities want the government, the parties to adopt now, and then when they form government, they would implement. One would be protect all the forests, the reserved areas. Exactly. Areas. In Freetown, in the rural areas, protect our beaches. We've seen the issue of sand mining. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Respect our rights as community members. Mm-hmm. Make sure you talk to us before you give out our land to people to do mining. Come and talk to us first. Seek our consent before you go and sign things on our behalf. So these are basic things that the communities felt that they could put in front of these parties that are now contesting for power. And so once you get them now, they want the votes. That's the thing. They want the votes of people. And so the people are using their
So in your view, you believe this conference is timely?
It is absolutely timely. It was actually timed to meet this particular period, so that before they go into the elections next week, this has been on the table, and the parties have signed up to it. And so it was wonderful to see. We didn't have the full participation of the entire 17 political parties, but the ones that came, the 9 or so that came, after hearing the stories of these people, what they've gone through across the 12 districts and then the western area, they then sat there and said, we are putting pen to paper. We are committing ourselves to doing these things in the pledge, making sure that we respect your rights. We consult you and seek your consent before your land is given off to investment. We protect the forests. We really put an end to logging, because we don't have much forest left, Raman, and that is a disaster waiting to happen.
Almost all the forest covers are gone.
Exactly. And so it's not just about protecting what is left, but also reclaiming it and making sure you grow this forest again. So these are commitments that the parties have now signed up to. They put their pen to paper, and people have copies of these, and we have them on tape.
Lasukis, I tell you what, the argument over the years advanced by government officials is that if these lands remain to be followed, you don't have any multinational corporation to come and invest on these lands. They will be there till whenever. And it is good that this company do come and invest in, for whatever little that they get as a benefit, would perhaps go a long way in addressing some of their accompanying challenges. So it doesn't matter whether it's a poll to some, but the bottom line here is, in as much as we wouldn't want to see a situation where all of those lands will remain to be followed, let somebody come, because we don't have the expertise in the first place. The machineries, the technical know-how, the how we call it, the technical competence in ensuring that we do undertake key exercise on those lands. Us as a nation cannot do it. So why not allow investors to come in, irrespective of what they receive at the end of the day? That has been a forward argument ever been advanced by subsequent administrations.
I mean, I think that is a very dangerous argument, because it completely undermines and undervalues what you have as a country. We must understand that what we have has been given to us, and we have to take serious responsibility for how it is managed. Now, I need to make this very clear, that no one is against investment. No one is saying that people should not come in and
especially FDI.
Exactly, do direct investments or work in the mine sector or in the agriculture sector. What we want to see is responsible, fair investment in the country. And up till now, we have not been able to see responsible investment. And the challenge we have, especially for these large-scale mining operations, is that when a company comes in and takes your resources out, they're turning the soil over, and there are many implications for that. And they're not taking the time to put things back so that we could almost go to where we were before they came in, and you just leave things as they are. Then you're not benefiting the community. You're not doing anything of profit to the country. Now, we've been mining things in this country since when? The 1930s. What have we to show for that? I went to Connaught the other day, and there are pits that were dug in the 1930s that are still uncovered, that are still open. What happened to us? And they're now digging up more areas. And so we've not been responsible at all in all of these investments. So our argument is not that we shouldn't have investment. What we want to see would be responsible investment that comply with the environmental regulations of the land, that respect the rights of community members, that undertake the obligations that they have signed up with communities very seriously. This is what we're asking for. That is all the people want. Investment that is responsible, that respects their tenure rights, that respects the laws of the land. And we have not been seeing that in many cases. And so they are using this opportunity of the election to talk to these parties that are contesting for power, to take this very seriously, because it is affecting their lives and livelihoods. Imagine dozens of villages having their swamplands covered with iron ore sludge and tailings, or their water sources destroyed because of mining activities. How do you expect them to live? How do you want them to continue? in their surroundings. It's impossible. It's a life or death situation you're putting them into. And this should not be the case. Investment should not threaten the life and livelihoods, the longevity of these communities. Investment should sit side by side with community members. It should bring development and not really reduce them. That is what the communities want. That is what the people are, were asking for this morning.
And we've seen we've seen and read so many things about. It's happened in Nigeria where the oil spill into the worst of community people, Delta State, where Ken Saro-Wiwa was killed. Up to date, the people are calling for the government to actually take action, and the company responsible to actually ensure that they clean their surroundings before ever they venture into any other business. But let's look at the question of empowerment of the people who depend on the land as a pledge, and also govern with prudence and transparency. How important are these two elements in the pledge?
They are absolutely important. So the first bit of empowering these people, land in the provinces belongs to the people. It is theirs. It's their property. I mean, they've been there for many generations. And so if you, as a government, sit somewhere and then sign off their land to a mining company without engaging them first, then that is disempowering. You're not empowering the communities. If you sign off on an agreement, on an investment agreement, where the company goes in and violates every regulation in the book on the protection of the environment, that is disempowering. And we have lots of examples of that. A couple of weeks ago, some of these communities actually brought legal action against a certain mining company because their ore sludge and tailings was moving into their communities, into their swampland and into their water sources. And there was nothing they could do. They have approached the regulators and there has been no headway at all. And so that is very disempowering. Someone complains to the referee and the referee does nothing. I mean, in a football match, there will be an uproar. Mm-hmm. That's why the referee has the cards. Yeah? The referee has the red card and the yellow card to punish those who are playing the game in violation of the rules. And that is the purpose of the regulators. You want to prevent the operations of these companies from adversely affecting these communities. And if they do that, you need to fall on them to remedy those challenges.
Could it be a situation where perhaps, in principle, we have superior land policies, but the compliance about them is not helping us to a larger extent?
So that is one of the biggest problems we have as a country. We are always able to pass fantastic laws that are forward-looking, that are really proactive, but we almost always fall short on implementation. And sometimes I think it's about political will. We don't want to ruffle the waters. We want to maintain some balance. We're scared, especially in an election year, of ruffling some feathers. And so we do not enforce the regulations. You would find, Rahman, companies in this country undertaking operations that affect the environment adversely without doing their environmental impact assessment. So some companies have been in operation for 2-3 years, and they're still being chased to undertake their environmental impact assessment, which is completely against the provisions of the law. The law says before you start operating, you need to do an assessment of the likely impact of your operations on the people, on the community, on the land, on the air, on the soil, on the water, before you start operations. But then you find the situation where these companies are 2 or 3 years into their operations and they have not done that. That is a flagrant violation of the law. And we've not been able to muster the courage to actually penalize these companies for these infringements of the law. And so I think that is a major concern. And one of the big things the communities have been asking for is simple. Please implement the law. We have good laws. Let's implement the law. And that, unfortunately, is one of the biggest failings of all of the governments that we've had in this country.
Again, another key issue that was mooted during the engagement is what they refer to as the broad distinction between exploration and mining. You'll have a company coming in to invest in the country. They will tell you we are in for exploration exercise, but in between they undertake mining activities. And that timeline that the government tend to give to companies to actually explore and mine is pretty much unending. And the people are now calling, they are now saying, if a company is being consented to do business with them on the consideration of them embarking on exploration, there ought to be a timeline. I have seen a company in this country that has undertaken exploration exercise for over 40 years. And when you undertake exploration exercise, it's like you're finding something you've not yet seen. And with biological extension, in that case, you degrade the land, you don't embark on land reclaim and all the rest of it. All of those things we have been flouted upon. So I go again to say we need to be pretty much clear, because it's a broad distinction between exploration and mining.
So I would say that we shouldn't have that challenge at all, because the law is also clear. Many of these things are called mining rights or mineral rights. They are time bound. So the license, exploration license or mining license, would be for a period of time, 5 years, 7 years, and it's also renewable. Now, many of the mining licenses would last for between 20 and 25 years. So where the company has found that there was something there, they mine for 25
Economic
years.
viability.
Exactly. And then they have an option to renew the license. But these agreements definitely have a time, a time frame according to the law. Now, the challenge is that communities have seen situations where a company would claim that they're exploring, and when you're exploring, your responsibilities are much less than when you're mining. Okay, they will claim they're exploring, and then they're actually mining, so that they would not be compelled to fulfill the requirements of a mining company.
Exactly.
And so if you see a company that is doing that, you are at liberty to raise the alarm. And I think the Minerals Agency would definitely need to do a lot more in terms of engaging with communities on the purpose for which these companies are in those communities.
You remember the aspects of police intimidation that comes up when people were making their revelations?
Yes, indeed, that came up, and I would say that that is also one of the challenges that we have seen throughout the close relationship between these corporate players and those who have power. Now, I know that government would say, well, we want to protect investment. But I think in a number of cases, there has been some sort of overreach and overreaction with respect to protecting investment. People have a right to protest. People have a right to say that we are not satisfied with this outcome. We want to vent our grievances. Now, I know the police can protect property and want to protect law and order, but there is no justification for shooting at people and killing them or causing grievous damage to these, to communities and to people. Now, we recently witnessed the British court sitting here on a case of that nature, and it's examining brutality by the police.
Gross violation of human rights.
Exactly, and so that is one of the things we need to really deal with again. We have to be clear about how the forces behave when it comes to these interrelationships. That you're there to protect, but you're not there to offend, to go against people who are exercising their rights. Everyone is under obligation to respect the law, but people do have a right, if they want to vent out their dissatisfaction, they have a right to do that within the law. But using live ammunition and going in with guns to quell protest is something that we'd have to look at as well. And these are some of the things that these community members were putting out to the parties today, that you need to know how you're dealing with these issues. And the fact is, people would become dissatisfied if the arrangement is wrong from the beginning. So if you fail to consult them, if you fail to seek their consent with respect to a particular investment, they don't have a voice, a say in what goes into the agreement, and you treat them as if they don't matter, and when they make complaints to the regulators, they don't listen to them, then definitely people would become angry and annoyed and would want to vent out their grievances. So it is important for us to avoid these kinds of situations, for these agreements to be on a proper footing from the start. So people need to be consulted. People need to be their consent would need to be sought. You need to go into the communities and engage with them in a language they understand, for them to know what they're getting into. And if you do that, I think you would obviate the need for all of these kinds of militarized interventions.
Okay. On resolution 4 and 5, which I think is the list here, it says we call on every registered voter who is canvassed by political parties during the remaining days of the election campaign to ask questions about the party's plan to protect our land and environment and the process, and President to give firm commitment. And lastly, 5, we call on all political parties to undertake the campaign peacefully, avoid situation that could result in a breach of the peace, and infuse in their campaign slogan message of peace and non-violence. Signed this 27th day of February 2018. That's that for the communique. How important are those two resolutions, 4 and 5?
So I would say they are very important in the sense that the fourth one is actually calling on the electors, those who have registered to vote, to ask questions of these parties when they come to win their votes, because it's important. It's not just about dancing and saying yes. It's about probing these parties and asking important questions about their programs. So what are your programs for protecting our beaches that are being destroyed by sand mining? Tell us what 2 or 3 things you would do in the first year of your rule if you win power to protect and reclaim the sand that we've lost in our beaches. So it's important that we as electors, as voters, ask the hard questions when these parties come to us to ask for our votes. Now, I am going to be voting, and I'm going to be asking those questions if a party comes to me, and I would expect the same of you as well, Raman, and those who are watching and listening to us right now, to ask important questions about how they're going to protect your land rights, your environment, because this is what we have. If we lose it, we're finished as a nation. Because if we lose our land, we lose our environment, we're done. And it's so important that we understand this. And I would say on the fifth point, we don't want to have violence in this election period. We have gone through enough violence already. We had violence, terrible violence for 10 to 11 years. We don't want to see that. Okay? So the people are calling on everyone, particularly the parties, their executives, their representatives, to please undertake the campaigning in peace. That is absolutely important. And let's get.
I was just going to ask the question as to whether you've taken your time off to look at the manifestos of political parties, especially manifestos of the APC, the SLPP, and the National Grand Coalition. What the consideration is when it comes to land management?
So I would say that it's heartening to note that these manifestos do mention issues relating to land and natural resources. And for me, and that is a question I would be asking these parties that come to to campaign to get my vote. It's good to say that we will do this, we will do that, we'll change this, we'll change that. What I am interested in is the how, Raman. The how question is absolutely important. Now, anyone could say they're doing X, Y, and Z, because it's easy to say that. But it takes someone who has really thought through the issues to give you the steps. So how are you going to address the issue of degradation of our beaches along the peninsula? How are you going to address the proliferation of buildings across the protected areas of the sugar loaf? What are you going to do to enforce the regulations, the laws? How are you going to save the remaining forest that we have, the less than 5% of our original forest? How are you going to save those? How are you going to improve? How are you going to move us from 5 to 7 to 10 to 15 to 20%? So these will be the things that I'm looking for. The how is absolutely important.
So conclusively, in raising the awareness and this advocacy, us as journalists, we too have a role to play.
Absolutely.
Good. Tomorrow is going to be the final day for the campaign for the ruling All People's Congress Party. I give you my word that I will ensure that I will be part of that rally for one reason, to actually talk to the organizers of the program tomorrow to see whether I will be given the opportunity to put forward some of this question on behalf of the people to the flag bearer of the party, Dr. Samura Kamara, on the question of land management with respect to the communique that has been signed by the people this morning at the Meta Conference Hall.
That would be wonderful, Raman, and it would show that the partnership is working, because we rely on the media to act as the mouthpiece. So the people...
Because I believe this perception that you cannot do this fight alone.
Absolutely. And so that
it
was
the
why...
effort of everybody.
Exactly. That was why the people came from all of the districts, and we called the media to come in to help amplify the message.
And I dare say all of the revolution put together by different representatives, to me, they seem pretty much absurd, especially on the aspect of composition, the aspect of compliance on the corporate social responsibilities and land reclaim, all of those things put together. But what seems to be pretty much blurred in all of these is the role of the paramount rulers as the custodian of the land. And
I think that is something we would have to address in the coming weeks and months. So for this time period, we're looking at those who are contesting for political power. Let's see how we could influence them to adopt a robust program to protect the land and natural resources of the country. And then once we have that in place, we're going to engage the paramount chiefs. They are a vital part of the development of this country. And they need to understand that we cannot do business as usual, because our land, the land that we love, is at stake.
Well, I just said this to our viewers, especially to the hierarchy of the All People's Congress Party, that tomorrow you'll be having your final campaign in the city of Freetown. I will ensure that I meander my way to have access to the candidate of the APC and put forward some of these questions as to how, when he will power in the next couple of days, what could be his position on land management for the benefits of the people of this country. On this note, I want to thank you so much, Lason Kita-Conte, Director Namati, for sparing your time being part of this program. And I will want to give you my word that us in the media will engender our effort in ensuring that your objective, the generic objective of managing the land in this country, is pretty much realized.
Thank you so much, young man. It's been a pleasure.
Great. Otherwise, this is how I bring the curtain into this edition of the program. Thanks to my studio guest, Lason Kita-Conte. My name is Sabu Rahman Kamara. Have a blast.